Hi there, readers and writers. My name is Miss Hudson, and I am your virtual teacher. Welcome back. We're getting started on a new topic within our bigger topic this week, a new article, and we're beginning week 8, lesson 34. Our guiding questions remain: how is the adolescent brain changing? And how can I make an informed decision about an issue like screen time, and then effectively argue my position? This is all about getting more knowledgeable. And this week, our topic is going to lead us to social media and how we interpret and get our news as adolescents, young people. So the materials that you'll need for today's lesson are here on the screen. You'll want your lesson 34 note catcher, which is 2 pages. You can see both of those note catcher pieces on your screen right now, and also just lesson 34, along with your article reading this week. All of this is in your distance learning packet. And the article this week for week 8 is called "More People Are Using Critical Thinking Skills Before Sharing News." So I want you to please pause the video, gather these things along with a pencil, and meet me back here in just a quick minute. I'll see you. All right, with your distance learning packet, you're going to now, we're going to get into the article, but we're going to look at our learning targets. And today we're going to go back and focus on the gist. I can determine the gist of the sections of text. In this article, that's what we're going to do. We're going to break it down by section and write the gist in our note catcher. Also, I can use a variety of strategies to determine the meaning of unknown words and phrases. We've talked about this for weeks now. Let's make it a habit to not just skip words that we don't know, or to just assume we think we know what it is. Let's do a little recon, some investigation, and find out what those words actually mean. So our learning targets are gist and words, and we're going to get started with our reading. And as we do every week, this might not be something that you want, but I will begin today with a read aloud of the article itself. If that is not helpful for you, you could probably just fast forward through this part of the video and read it on your own. But if it's easy, and a scaffold and something that your teacher would do also, you can just get your article, maybe a writing utensil like the pencil I mentioned. And as I read aloud, you can have your eyes on print and maybe even writing on your paper. That's what I do. I really, if I have to know something, I have to read with something in my hand, because I'm constantly, I used a orange marker for all of these so that you might be able to see how I underline things. I'm always annotating, writing myself questions. This is what I do because I'm a very distractible reader. I'm a lot older than a lot of people, and back in those days, growing up here in the state of Michigan, I can tell you that we didn't have a lot of these same kinds of assessments. And I don't know how I would have done, to be honest with you. Because when I read, my mind kind of floats away a little bit if I'm reading to myself. And I just get distracted. So I don't remember details. So I've learned after school, I went on to college, and then I kept going to school and I kept going to school. And then I was a teacher for 30 years. And so I've learned this skill called annotation. So during this time, if you have something in your hand, you can be circling things that are interesting, or putting a little exclamation point there, or putting a question mark where there's something that you don't understand, or a star if it's something that you super agree with. This is just a way to stay engaged in your reading. I'm sure your teachers talk to you about this all the time. I know, you're 7th graders. I got it. So what I'm going to do is the read aloud, and depending on if it's necessary, I might pause and do a little think aloud also. Sometimes I do that. And if I make a mistake, I'm just going to fix it. because it won't be perfect. My brain doesn't work that way. It's not perfect all the time. It does these little miscues sometimes when I'm reading aloud under the pressure of the video. Here we go. The title of this week's article around the adolescent brain and issues and getting informed is more people are using critical thinking skills before sharing news. So this is going to talk to us about how people, young people in particular, all people, are consuming a lot of news in social media and how they are vetting it or checking it before they share it or just assume it's accurate. Okay. As we go here, we're going to just remember a couple of things as we read. I want you to think about, how do you stay informed about news and current events in your city, in your state, in this country, and in the world? And do you ever fact check the news before you believe it? I've started a behavior of doing a little fact checking, and I think a lot of people have. This article talks about that. So be thinking about that. How do you stay informed? And do you fact check? All right, here we go with the reading. Many young people are skilled in using social media. However, that does not mean they trust it as their only source for news. A new survey was published by Harvard University. It found that more than 2/3 of young Americans disapprove of President Donald Trump's use of Twitter. It appears that millennials prefer White House news to be filtered through other reliable sources, not a president's social media page. The poll fits nicely with other data that has come out. People who read the news are starting to take more care in how they navigate all the retweets, the likes and shares of the digital age. Many Americans rely on social media to check daily headlines. Yet, as distrust has risen toward all media, people might be starting to beef up their media literacy skills. Seeking out opposing viewpoints. Such a trend is badly needed. During the 2016 presidential campaign, nearly 1/4 of web content shared by Twitter users in Michigan was fake news, according to the University of Oxford. Michigan is also a swing state. Swing states are seen as important in swinging the results of presidential elections. Another survey by BuzzFeed News found 44% of Facebook users rarely or never trust news from Facebook. Young people who grew up in the digital world are getting better at separating fact from fiction. A Knight Foundation survey was done of young people between the ages of 14 and 24. It found they use distributed trust to verify or confirm stories. In other words, they cross-check sources and prefer news from different perspectives, especially those that are open to any bias or prejudice. Many young people assume a great deal of personal responsibility for educating themselves and actively seeking out opposing viewpoints, the survey concluded. University research sees political awareness. Such active research can have another effect. A 2014 survey was conducted in Australia, Britain, and the United States by the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It found that young people's reliance on social media led to a greater political engagement. Social media allows users to experience news events more intimately and immediately. It also permits them to reshare news as a projection of their values and interests. This forces users to be more conscious of their role in passing along information. A survey by Barna Research Group found the top reason given by Americans for the fake news phenomenon is reader error. In other words, it was not so much that the stories were made up or that there were factual mistakes in reporting. People were just reading it wrong. About 1/3 say the problem of fake news comes from misinterpretation or exaggeration of actual news from social media. Fact check, then share. So, the choice to share news on social media might be the heart of the issue. This indicates there is a real personal responsibility in counteracting this problem, says Roxanne Stone, editor-in-chief at Barna Group. To be a good steward of our social media platforms includes a responsibility to do our research, she adds. People should fact check a story before sharing it and double check a news source to make sure it's a credible one. This way, we can perhaps widen our circles and read the news that reaches outside our own limited perspectives, she says. So when young people are critical of an over-tweeting president, they reveal a careful discipline in thinking skills. It also shows they are becoming thoughtful in their choices on when and what to share on social media. A 2-page article this week, less visuals. Most of our articles go all the way to 3 pages. So there's an introduction to that article and 3 sections, all on this topic of using critical thinking skills before sharing news. So as you read that with me, listened, read along, you were to reflect on how you stay informed about things that are happening in your city and in your state. There's a lot going on right now. So hopefully you are staying up to speed. And this behavior of fact checking is something that 7th graders can definitely start developing habits around. So I wonder if you would please just pause the video and maybe have a conversation with a family member or a caregiver, possibly a friend, and talk about this idea that even media news sources are sometimes biased. Like there are news sources in the state of Michigan and across the country who might be leaning toward one political persuasion or another. You just need to know where you're getting your news from so that you know that those biases could be there. So you know what you're hearing. And if you can listen to news from multiple viewpoints, you'll be more informed. So have a conversation about what is your favorite news source. Please have one, even if you're faking it for a while. I realize 7th graders might not have all favorite news sources, but I bet you do. You know where the news is, what channels those would be, or what radio stations, or what social media apps maybe you use. And what do you think about fake news? It certainly is talked about a lot. Do you think there's fake news? Have a conversation about that. And in what ways do you consider yourself a good consumer of news? Like actually being interested in the news. Have a quick conversation. Pause the video for a few minutes. I'll see you back here. All right. Thank you so much. You know, I realize that I've been probably in my life, there have been times when I'm consuming a lot more news than other times. During times of crisis, I tend to be a real newsmonger. That means I watch a lot of the news. After I was born and raised in Detroit, I spent a lot of time in Florida. And down there, when you're a teacher and it's during the school year, there's this time called hurricane season. And you want to watch the news during hurricane season to see if there's a hurricane coming. I've been in a couple and it can be crazy. Also, you know, I was a high school history teacher when 9/11 happened in New York City and other surrounding areas with planes down and buildings collapsing. It was a very difficult, confusing, and complex time. And I was very attached to the news. And just as a historian, just as a history teacher and a literacy teacher, I'm very interested in current events and politics and being knowledgeable about my governor, my city mayor, and the government that runs my local, community, state, and national organizations. And so I take that very seriously, always have, even from the state of Michigan, like I know many of you are in. So we're going to do this GIST vocabulary note catcher now. And what you'll do is find your lesson 34 note catcher. This is going to take you about 20 minutes. And I'd like you to read each of the 4 sections of the article. You can listen to, you can rewind or go back. You can listen to you reread it, or you can just look at those sections. What is this part of the section mostly about? So the introduction actually starts right below the picture on page 1 and goes to the bottom of that page. That's the introduction. Really tricky the way that the page is cut, because the second topic is introduced at the very bottom of page 1. And it says, seeking out opposing viewpoints. So that's your second GIST statement. You read that section that's at the top of page 2. Okay. And you write a GIST statement. What is that mostly about? Then there is a third section that's called University Research Sees Political Awareness. What is that section mostly about? What is the gist? And then the last section is called Fact Check, then Share. Reread that and write your GIST statement. Throughout the article, I identified 4 words that I thought we should probably pause and think about. You might have come up with some others as well. You can use other space in your note catcher on the back. I chose the words millennials, distrust, prejudice, and exaggeration. And so as you come across those words, and it tells you if it's on page 1 or page 2, you can find those words, try to define them in your own words, and tell me the strategy that you use to figure those out. It's about 20 minutes it's going to take you to do those 4 GIST statements and those 4 vocabulary words and others if you came across them. So you can go ahead and pause the video here. Come on back when you're done and we'll finish today's lesson. Thank you so much. All right, fantastic. Welcome back. You know, a gist is a little bit different than a main idea, because a gist is just a gut, like this is mostly about this thing, I think. That's what I think. And so a gist statement is a little less formal, and you're not always citing evidence. You know, you're just saying it's mostly about this idea. Okay, so for each of your note catchers sections, you know, the first section of today's article, this week's article, is really just looking at how millennials are viewing both President Trump's tweeting behaviors and how they check social media headlines. And so the introduction, the gist is really getting the reader familiar with Twitter, the concept of millennials and how they get their news. That's the gist, okay? And you would need to actually look up millennials or distrust and those kinds of things that we outlined in the vocabulary. I hope you'll share your writing with someone, and this week maybe have those conversations as we have done in the past, and tell why you wrote down the things that you did. And remember to keep track of your note catchers from lesson 34, 35, 36, because it'll help you at the end of the week with lesson 38. So don't get rid of your work and your thinking. And don't forget that after you complete this assignment with me today, you could read for another 20 minutes or so, maybe lose track of time, enjoy a good book, good magazine, something online, the news, maybe the news. Okay. And your fluency practice for today is to always do what we do on the day 1. That's our lesson today. You would start reading the article, start a timer, like a cell phone timer or kitchen timer, count to 60 seconds, and just read as far as you can and count up the number of words and see how many that is. Throughout the week, you will do close readings of this article, do some deeper dives into some of the topics, and your fluency will improve. So we'll take a look at the number at the end of the week as well. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, and I will see you again very soon. I hope you make it a great day.